Welcome to CMMS Radio, a podcast and general resource for all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, from selection to implementation to help you make better choices and have a successful CMMS journey. We'll bring in experts along the way to help us learn more about CMMS, facilities operations, and much more. If you need help with the CMMS project, send a message at cmmsradio.com using the What's on Your Mind link. Suggest a topic, share your CMMS story, or ask questions. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We've got a returning guest. It's Bryan Bieschke. You all know him if you've watched the podcast. He's over there at UpKeep doing great things in community and partnerships. He's a certified maintenance and reliability professional, and we were just talking a little bit about a recent trade show he was at. They were talking a lot of trash up there, and I wanted Bryan to tell us a little bit about this concept of maintenance as a revenue generator, or is it really more about mitigating costs, and why is that important? Bryan.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me again. Yes, we were at Waste Expo last week. It was awesome. I felt right at home. That was my idea to go to Waste Expo for UpKeep. It's a great place, awesome dudes, a lot of owner operators, so people out there doing the work, owning the business. It was awesome. And I had a lot of conversations surrounding cost and savings. And my opinion of this is that we, as maintenance, CMMS, reliability professionals, we don't save money. There's always this talk where people are like, oh, we can save you this much money. We can save this much money. And my answer is always, where am I saving money? Where is that money actually being saved? At the end of the day, we're avoiding cost. And the money that you save is actually going to be just earmarked for something else, likely, if you're good, going to something more beneficial and more optimized, more efficient for the business. But we mitigate risk and we reduce and limit cost. We don't save money. And the way in which you can quantify that is, another people will say, maintenance is a revenue generator. I also don't necessarily believe in that wordage either. What I like to say is that through mitigating risk and through reducing cost, the business is able to allocate funds more effectively to generate revenue, or product and demand and missed opportunity and all these things are more optimized so that the business can generate more revenue. So we're a revenue contributor through the reduction of waste and cost. I had a lot of those conversations. And the reason it was so valuable for a lot of the attendees of Waste Expo is because they're owner operators. They are leading, managing, and maintaining their own stuff with sometimes limited resources. Yeah. And in these industries, margins are very thin. So the more optimized their strategy in maintaining their assets that make them money, the more cost avoidance they can achieve. And therefore, that money can be earmarked for better things or go right into the owner's pocket, right? So yeah, that was the talk track prior to recording. Greg wanted me to elaborate on. So.
Yeah, because for everybody out there, Bryan and I go back now a ways, and when we talk about this stuff, we have such interesting conversations off mic where we can really cut loose, and we'll be visiting, and I'll say, "Wait a minute, man, I got to hit record. I need you to say that again," and because it's impactful. And what we're really trying to do out here, regardless of, who you are, where you are, you might be a CMMS provider, you might be a CMMS user, you might be thinking about it. We are like-minded in that we want to give good guidance, but we want it to be real. We want it to be impactful. And another thing that we were talking about was this concept of add value. And it kind of has become a buzzword at different times over the last several years. But what it really means is, between the tangibles and the intangibles, the real impact, meaning it has to be a real difference maker. It can't just be, like a buzzy word that's empty, that gets your attention. It has to be, well, where is that value? Can you talk a little bit about that, Bryan, when it comes to not just Waste Expo, but overall, when we say things like add value, you have to add the value. What does that really mean to you?
Yeah, to me, I think of it this way. value to me in a maintenance organization or an organization in general is two things. It's something that's connected to the business and something that's measurable, right? And sometimes the measurable side of it is kind of a dichotomy because there are things that are very valuable that are intangible at the time, right? So I like to use the example of double handling in CMMS implementation, where it's like, yeah, we buy this big fancy system, kind of complicated. We're going to get through the implementation and then we're good, right? Well, no, we're going to constantly have to revisit certain aspects of that implementation of that system because we're not fully understanding of it. Because maybe it's not connected to the business, right? Maybe it's not measurable. So that's what I mean by that. And a lot of the things that are missed are the intangibles, double handling, more training, revisiting things because of poor adoption, revisiting things because of bad data, revisiting things because the system won't scale with you appropriately. So that's what I mean by that. Value to me is connected to the business and is measurable, whether tangible or intangible. And that's, I know that sounds like a dichotomy, and it is, but it's context based.
Sure. And speaking of context, when we talk about CMMS as a tool and it's going to make these different impacts, one of the things that's important to understand is not, what you read on a CMMS provider's website. It's also important when you're talking to the different representatives and customer facing individuals at these different organizations that they may or may not truly understand what they're doing, because oftentimes, and I don't know that this is a dig, this is more like, hey, there's ways to improve it, but
This is reality.
the reality is we get a lot of surface generalization type understandings of these things. And I wonder if that creates more of a challenge when somebody, maybe they like someone, they trust someone, they're listening to all these buzzwords, and all of a sudden they move forward, they get that solution in place, and now they're going to suffer these other disruptions that they didn't realize were almost I'd like to call them the hidden or unexpected real costs of getting a CMMS. It's not the buying and licensing of the CMMS. It's not necessarily the deployment, but between the deployment and the adoption stage, you're going to have a lot of things that may or may not be set up right, simply because this might not be the only reason, but simply because somebody doesn't understand that part of it. They know how to talk about it and say it, but they haven't actually done it. Why is that such a critical component of how you interface with potential clients and existing clients?
Everybody, look, we can just be real about this. Look, when I approach somebody at a trade show or anywhere and I start talking about their world, immediately they're going to think, does he actually know what my world is like? And that's just a natural thing. When people, I get introduced to people like, oh, this guy's the whatever of whatever, and he's going to tell you about X, Y, and Z. The first thing in my head is like, has that guy done that thing? Because it's totally different. It's totally different than knowing about something and actually have done it. And I have this conversation constantly. At Waste Expo, I had guys come up to me who are like, oh, I run a scrap handling facility. I'm like, sweet. What kind of material handlers do you use? Do you use Centerbogan? Do you use Fuchs? Do you use Liebherr? What kind of grapples are you using? Right? So all these things, because I have the context, I've been in their shoes, I've done the work, I've managed those machines. So that right there makes a connection. Bang, this dude is talking my language. We know the same things. Let's have a real good conversation about the offering or the solution, or maybe it doesn't work at all, right? Because we have to vet customers. We want customers that are going to work with our solution. We're not saying we can shotgun blast out there and take everybody that there is, because that's a disservice to the customer.
It is, and to the industry.
Right. And then the other part of that is talking about the double handling and waste aspect of this is, I had a couple conversations where I was being told like, hey, we do this with pen and paper. I've got a filing cabinet. The guys do this. They call in, they radio in the hours of the machine. This girl writes it down or guy writes it down. And I go, what's your role? They're like, I'm a maintenance manager. I said, how are you able to be the maintenance manager if your day is consumed by these tasks? if you're the maintenance manager, if I hire a maintenance manager, I want that person to be building a strategy, a structure, providing strong leadership and guidance to his team, looking at the overall vision of the business and aligning himself with it or herself. How can they do that if they are stuck writing down maintenance notes on a sticky tab and then going through their filing cabinet and going, oh, okay, we haven't done this work. Oh, I didn't pay this invoice. Okay, this part over here is, oh, our inventory is all jacked up. How's that possible? You're essentially failing the person you've hired before they even have a chance to succeed, right? And I'm not saying CMMS is the end all solve for all those things, but it comes down to, what are you paid and hired to do, right? When my maintenance managers worked for me at Host, I made sure they had a CMMS. I made sure they had the tool. I was the resource to ensure they could move effectively and efficiently through the business. And they would come to, some of them would come to me like, hey, I have this problem and this is my idea. This is what I should do. And I go, great. And they go, you don't have any feedback? I say, no, sounds wonderful. You're the expert. Execute.
I love that, because I say that shit a lot on on the podcast, that I love what people say. And the reason I'm always doing that is it kind of hits with the environments I've been exposed to over the years, where this idea of getting these great people onto our teams, there's a lot of effort that gets made there. You have to go through several interviews and vet people, and then you bring them on. And you brought them on because they have a skill set, a certain attitude, certain potentials, and all these things. And from a leadership perspective, and the reason this is related to CMMS is because the CMMS is a tool that you give to your people to make them better and show them how to use it, not force them to use it, but show them why it makes an impact so that they can do what you hired them to do, not because they're a minion, but because they're great at what they do. And if all this other stuff is getting in the way, taking away their time, and like you say, you have a maintenance manager that can't manage maintenance because he's dealing with a bunch of rudimentary tasks. This was the whole reason somebody in the first place tried to web enable the paper processes that they had in place anyway. They were like, wow, this is great. We know what's going on, but it takes too long. How could we digitize that some way? And it started with somebody going, well, let's go from paper to a spreadsheet or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden one day we're on the web doing it on these dramatic systems that have all the bases covered, provided you use them in the right way and set them up the right way. So I get really excited about that, because that's the message that matters. That's why this kind of stuff matters and how a CMMS can make an impact. But empowering your people is where it should start. Did anything come up at Waste Expo where some of these independent operators or otherwise were talking about how they made good progress maybe with an attempted CMMS deployment, and it fell down simply because they didn't involve their frontline workforce when they were about to make said selection or create the project? Did any of that come up in conversations? Because I think you had a couple hundred conversations at least.
Oh, we crushed it. It was an absolute success. But in this world, CMMS is not the term. So they don't know CMMS. Right? The majority of them know fleet software.
Okay.
So fleet software is managing their DOT compliance stuff, their ticketing, their checklists, maybe some planning and scheduling, a lot of telematics, meaning GPS, cellular and satellite connection to individual assets when they're traveling around, knowing their trip times and cost and what they're doing, all that, right? But where CMMS really draws the line and differentiates is its robustness for maintenance activities and work processes. So you're able to build out and draw a lot more data, a lot more historian from a CMMS than you would from like a fleet management software. So that was a lot of conversations I had. And a lot of them weren't doing anything. So it wasn't like I had to talk about the downfalls or shortcomings of a current system. There was only a handful of people who had a fleet management software that they didn't like because it wasn't robust, right? It tracked their things rudimentarily. One guy I talked to, he had a fleet management software. He's a real cool guy. And I said, hey, is it mobile? He was like, yeah. I said, can you pull it up on your phone and show me? He goes, oh, I've never logged into it.
It's so common. People don't believe that, but that's so common.
And I said, well, it's clearly not adding any value for you as the business owner. And And he just laughed. He's like, get our info. I want to talk. So it's like you just have to draw these lines sometimes. But the waste industry from the mobile side, which is all the trash trucks and material handling equipment, scrap and landfills, all that stuff, is kind of different than we talk about the waste industry as it pertains to like plant operations, like recycling centers and trash centers, like stuff like that, because it's different types of assets, different contexts. So there was both. We saw mostly the mobile side, municipalities, trash companies, material handling and waste companies, all that stuff. It was very limited plant style maintenance, which is CMMS would everyone would know the CMMS in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder, it's this whole idea about this waste expo is so interesting to me because last year I met some people that were in, you know, waste management, and like you just said, they knew exactly what CMMS was. They knew exactly why they use it, all those things. And in some ways they didn't care which one it was. They just cared that it does what it's supposed to do.
Sure.
Were you able to find opportunities to kind of deal with direct frontline workforce that don't set it up but actually have to participate
Of
and
course.
like interact with the system?
Of course. You know me. That's where I shine, man. Because I've been that person.
Yeah.
I've been the
What
guy turning the wrenches.
what did they seem to have as far as now this is a little bit less CMMS related, but was there anybody there that was in more of an advanced state of maintenance maturity that's not just utilizing a CMMS but also leveraging some of the other technologies like sensor monitoring, condition monitoring,
Yes.
vibration analysis, etc.? Did you see
Yeah.
very much of that?
Yeah. Not like a crazy amount like you would at like SMRP or Reliable Plant or something like that, or like International Maintenance Conference things. But yeah. So a lot of the larger like municipalities like I think LA. I talked to some heavy hitters over at like the Los Angeles waste, like all the landfills and stuff like that, and like the processing plants and things, and they had a much more robust system, more plant style maintenance. They were leveraging data and stuff like that, which makes sense, right? I mean, the money that flows into those avenues is, the money that comes in affords the ability to hire more qualified people. You're able to have a little more influence in how things are managed because tax dollars are paying for it. I'm not going to say that there isn't a lot of bureaucracy associated with all those things, but it seemed as though some of them had some legit and we just had good conversations. There wasn't no sales pitch, it was just good conversations, trading stories, talking about optimization and best practices and things like that. So
I think that's how it really, really comes together. And one of the things I'm always trying to kind of wrestle with is in this world of CMMS, where for practically two straight decades, I was helping clients and qualifying and onboarding them, and I was participating a little bit in the deployment, or my team was, and I was hearing about it. And I think what often made the difference wasn't trying to get the sale; it was the direct opposite of that, where the conversations weren't just real and I wasn't just waiting for opportunities to go, hey, here's the contract, you can sign it. It was more about really getting to understand them. And this comes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, where your teams at UpKeep, for example, or if we talk about UpKeep ambassadors that have these understandings of what really happens in their environment, and you understand first, then you can actually help.
sure.
And I think I'm passionate about that. It doesn't mean I don't want people buying a bunch of my software if I had some to offer. It's
Sure.
more about, that thing I'm always talking about,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
elusive win-win, and how we
Sure.
really turn the corner. You have to know people and understand them. And if you don't, that's actually kind of okay if you're willing to learn and listen and be curious. So it starts there. And the
Right.
thing I'm getting to with my question is that's not as helpful when we're talking about like milestones with quotas and chasing in deals and all that kind of stuff. However, if you're doing that better and more often, your pipeline and all those forecasting metrics will start to line up again, because now you're doing the better work. It's almost like when you build something, it all starts with the foundation.
Sure. Don't get me started on that.
I was trying to. Foundational excellence when it comes to, best practices in maintenance and reliability, or otherwise anything related to it.
Culture, leadership, everything, right?
That stuff matters. Everybody's like, Greg, why are you always talking about that? I'm like, because that's where it all falls apart. You got beautiful technology sitting on a shelf collecting dust, and you're spending. Some of these people out here, these big enterprise organizations, they're spending millions on something
I
they're
don't
not using
I
effectively.
don't understand it, man. I hear some of the numbers from some people that I talk to, and they're like, "Oh, we spent our implementation cost $3 million." I'm like, "What?" Like, and you still can't even look at your dashboard and get any data out of it?
Or get your frontline workforce to actually
Yeah.
participate and log things.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, at the end of the day, I think people want to level and connect and recognize, right? I always say real recognize real. Um, if and then talk like these niche industries, they talk. A lot of them know each other and they talk. So the impressions that you make, whether sale or no sale, the impression that you make goes a long way because they're going to talk about it. And if I'm a insert random CMMS company and they hired me as a sales development representative and I was a car salesman beforehand, and some hard dude who's been turning wrenches at a landfill for 20 years comes up to me and starts asking me questions, that dude is going to know I'm full of shit.
Yeah.
He's going to know. These are not dumb people. These are extremely smart people, and they recognize the reality of what they're doing. If that same guy comes up to somebody and talks to somebody who's turned the wrenches at a landfill, who's had diaper juice drip all over them underneath a compactor, who has torn apart machines and had trash blown all over them and seagulls and all this other stuff, there's a connection there. He's going to
Yeah.
forget about the car salesman guy, and he's going to be thinking about the dude who was in maintenance, right? I would. I would.
I want to add one thing though, that I do think car salesman guy, retail salesperson, etc., and across the board.
I'm not shitting on car salesmen. Let me be
No,
clear. I'm
no, no.
talking about in the context of maintenance and like the connection you make with industry professionals. That's all I'm saying.
Of course, of course. Then to that exact point, that there's potential there if they go and get the knowledge.
Sure.
Like
Yes.
I know back when I was green to the industry, and I knew some things about some things that related to it, but I wanted to know more. I would just straight up tell people, I was doing this and this before, and I'm doing this now. Do you mind help me a little bit with understanding this, and this? I mean,
Yeah.
if you have the time, because you really know it, and I want to learn it because I want to be better. That's real shit.
Yeah. I mean, and
That-
our team at Waste Expo was just stacked, right? I've used UpKeep a long time. I don't pretend to know the product better than what the people that we have that know the product the best.
mhm.
And there were many conversations where I was going down a rabbit hole about just all the stuff that I know and they know, and we're connecting. And then they'd ask a question about product. And guess what? We had a product person there. I'd go, great question. I don't have the answer, but that person does. Hey, Nate, come here. Answer this question. We had AE there. We had marketing people. We had support people. Like there wasn't anything or any question that we were going to get that we could not answer for them on the spot. And I think that's valuable, right?
It
Because you
is.
can you can give the person the tools to make 10% of their decision on what they think about the whole thing right there. Instead of playing phone tag and just, oh, email me this and oh, it might do this, or I have no idea. Like people don't want to hear those things. I like to hear no. I love hearing no.
Well, no is, I've often said, it's one of the, if not the most powerful word in the English language or otherwise, because you give back and you get back time, and you're
Yes.
being real.
Yes.
That's
And
the important thing about the word no.
yes, I used to, before we had, when we were building our fleet of heavy machinery for host at one of our locations, I relied heavily on rental machines while we were purchasing and acquiring all of our machines. And I remember telling the sales rep, who I'm great friends with, that's CJ Kane, by the way, with United Rentals. You'll see the one posting all those weird words and stuff on my. We
Yeah.
have a lot of inside jokes. I've known him a long time. He's an awesome dude.
Steak.
But I would tell him straight up, like, if you can't help me, tell me no, because if you say yes, I'm going to be relying on you. And it could be any hour of the day. It could be during an operation where $1 million is on the line. Like, and the dude would tell me no. He'd be like, "Oh man, that's not going to happen." I gave him all my business because he was real with me. And it was
Yeah.
that important. So
Give me one second.
that's all good. No, I just think it's super important to know where you stand. And you hear me say this all the time. If you don't know what you're talking about, shut your mouth.
Well, that's that's about as real as you could get right there, Bryan.
Well,
That's
I
why I
mean,
like having you on, and that's why it's it's not for shock value, people. It's valuable. That's no different than saying no. Like somebody says, "Hey, can it do this, 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 and this?" What are you trying to do? We could go this way, but it doesn't really do that. And I want to be straight up about that because I want to see you succeed and thrive. And if
sure.
that means I don't get the business and I don't waste your time or mine, everybody wins. That's another
Yeah.
interesting little win-win. Because I'm getting ready to have a conversation with somebody about this concept of fear, uncertainty, and doubt,
Hmm.
which I got a lot to say about that. One thing, you and I want to switch gears. You and I have something upcoming that's really cool.
Very
And
cool.
this will not necessarily drop before we do the panel discussion, but we're going to Reliable Plant and we're going to have this panel discussion on the evolution of CMMS. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about that.
Sure.
Number one, do you think or do you prefer, I don't even know what I'm really trying to set up in saying that we're going to very quickly level set at the front end of this panel that, hey, we've got industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and there's 5.0 coming. And then there's the development stages of CMMS that went from paper to this. And then in around 2010 is when we started to see cloud-based. That was right after like ASP started going away. And I'm thinking that the best approach to talking about the evolution of CMMS is, hey, we know where it has been. Let's stay right around right now, a little bit back, maybe 5 to 10 years, and then talk about what's coming, as opposed to going through some boring ass history lesson.
Yeah. So I think that because of some of the people that are going to be on that panel,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think spending a couple minutes on where it began may be beneficial. Not like, we don't need to go crazy, right? But where it began, because I know when I took over some facilities, there was a facility in Baltimore, an Alcoa terminal for alumina, and I was over the maintenance for that facility, and the maintenance system that they had there was uh, wildly old, and it was just neat to see them mess around in it, right? And
Yeah.
they quickly went to UpKeep, but uh, yeah, it was. So I think an ode to that is kind of cool, getting some insight from Joe and Jeff on the that stuff, right? But I do like where we are, and the reason I say that is because where we are, the problems are still the same as where they were,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the problems are likely to be where we will be. And there's no better place to correct course than now, right?
Yeah.
So if we hold on to and we talk to the great things and the shortcomings of what we have now and where it could go, there's a better chance that some smarter people than us in the audience or listening could be like, I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm going to do X, and then they may be the next pioneer of some crazy CMMS thing in the future that we'll all be reading about in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I like the idea of hanging out where we are, uh, to understand our shortcomings and things like that.
Yeah. And my thought behind that was it's pretty typical that we're going to go through that kind of history lesson, but we don't have an entire week or day, a semester to go through all that kind of
No, it's a
stuff and all
lot.
the
It's a lot.
implications. So I want to knock it out in 5 minutes or less as a level set.
Right.
And then I want to craft some independent questions for you, for Joe, for Jeff, and of course for Bennett, which allows us to maximize that time because we're not going to have more than 45 minutes.
Sure.
And I want to really talk about some things that are going to add value. And I think the evolution of CMMS is important, is interesting, but there's something inside of it that's more important for us to talk about during that panel.
Evolution of CMMS is a massively broad term.
Very broad. And that was, and I want to get some specificity around, kind of, I want to ask about things like, what did we lose through this evolution and what did we gain?
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what has changed yet remained the same, which is really what it's all about. And I think overall we're going to land in this kind of 3.0, 4.0 conversation because that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
I think the majority of people are there. There's a few that are a little further back, and we're just going to see what gets going. And this part of this episode might come out after. I'm not quite sure, but I just wanted to kind of run that by you.
You should try to get it out before RP, man. It'd be sick.
I'll try. I've only got 19 other episodes ahead of it.
Nah, I can wait.
Yeah,
like I probably know 17 of those 19 people.
I'm pretty confident you do, but there's a couple that you're gonna probably, when I drop those episodes, you're gonna be like, Greg, why the hell did you do that?
I probably will. I love talking shit to you every once in a while.
It's good. I'm expecting it. I did an episode with somebody that's not necessarily in CMMS or maintenance.
That's okay.
But it was to help the industry as a whole from a sales perspective so that they can do better discovery.
Sure.
So that's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Look, maintenance is the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is the world. We can make and design great things. And some things we can design to last a lifetime. But the majority of things that we cannot design to last a life, or it's cost prohibitive or situational prohibitive, sustainability prohibitive. Things are going to need to be maintained.
Well, and it's unrealistic that there are things that don't need to be maintained unless those things are run to failure things.
Sure. And you talk about a salesperson, they probably use some sort of CRM that they are a pro at. And guess what? There's a whole team of engineers that are maintaining that system to ensure that it operates the way that it should for that person. So
and they themselves have to maintain their own day to day.
That's right. So anybody you talk to in the world is familiar with, connected to, or understands some form of maintenance.
I agree. I gotta think about that one for quite a while because that's a very interesting. It gives me a lot of ideas. I want to go quickly just before we wrap. I want to go back to Waste Expo.
Sure.
How often? Now we know what we know, and we're trying to learn more and change this. But how often were people talking about the skilled trades gap being a problem for them? And how, in your opinion, is that directly connected to the world of CMMS and maintenance management?
So talking about a lot of the people I talk to being owner operators, meaning you talk to a guy, he's the president of the company, he's got 6 trash trucks, and he's the one turning the wrenches on all 6 trash trucks.
Mm-hmm.
That says a lot, right? Do you think he wants to be the owner of the company but has to turn wrenches? And no, probably not, right? He wants to hire an appropriate person with the effectiveness to do those things, trustworthy and all that. And a lot of them say that they cannot. And that's a part of that. Or they have someone on standby, a contractor that performs those functions for them when they're needed. So you have this highly skilled person who's in demand everywhere, and you yourself can't find somebody to be in-house to do that work for you. So there was a lot of that. The skilled trade is very concerning, right? I mean, we know a lot of mutual people who advocate for that, and I'm connecting with those people actually tomorrow. And
I did yesterday.
I know you did. And I want to enable those people as much as I possibly can. And I'm a tradesperson, a heavy equipment mechanic the majority of my life. I come from a long line of my grandfather he was born in 1905. He worked on the B&O Railroad as an electrician for like 60 years. My uncles have all been in the Navy. They were all machinist mates, a CB, gunner's mate. So maintenance and like the skilled trades have been in my bloodline for a very, very long time. And I know there's a lot of people like that. We just have to get to the point where young people understand that these jobs are so crucial, so rewarding, lucrative.
Very lucrative.
I want to talk about that because people don't understand. You start a 2-man plumbing business, you'll make 600 grand a year if you have good abilities, strong licensing, good relationships, good customer service. Easy all day long. Plumbers are like the number one in demand trade at the moment, and just insert X trade and an entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to get knocked down and get back up and be strong and do the right things and be smart and seek advice, get a mentor. The sky is the limit.
And these people from the skilled trades that come up as youngsters getting exposed to it, getting interested, or whatever, somebody wants to make a career change and they're like, oh, that's cool, I want to learn how to weld. And all of a sudden you've got some 50-year-old out there that's welding like a champ because he can run a bead like nobody's business. These people end up on our maintenance teams and they end up closing out the work orders from our CMMS, and they have the mentality and the understanding of what that value of the work that they do really delivers. So it's all connected.
It's like I was just talking to John Livingston from McKinstry. Great dude. You should have him on. He's awesome. Naval submariner, like just brilliant dude. And I said we were talking about maintenance management and CMMS and Navy and things, right? We want as CMMS, any insert CMMS, right? Your goal should be to enable how the work is done. And the skilled trades are skilled. They know what they're doing. Build your systems surrounding the enablement of them. Yes, you're going to have to change things and modify things from a process standpoint. But you know how you get over that? Bring the skilled trade into the conversation and have them help you build it out. Because then you're truly enabling and aligning the process and the CMMS with the work being done.
That's a mic drop moment.
Yeah, sorry. But it's just, people just miss these basic things. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I am saying, having been the person who's been the trade, who has been the afterthought of these things, I can tell you when I was a part of them, I was using them.
Well, this is exactly why I brought it up, because it can't just come from me. It can't just come from Andrew Brown, who's a huge proponent of the skilled trades, the tradesman, the tradesperson, and making a serious impact on closing that gap. And there's several others. There's organizations, and this stuff is important. I wanted it to come from someone that really has been in those trenches and understands and gets it. It's not that I don't, but there's so many people that really do. And I want to hear that on the podcast for everybody instead of me just chirping. I want it to be real. So first of all, Bryan Bieschke, thank you for coming back on CMMS Radio. I am really looking forward to seeing you at Reliable Plant in a couple of weeks. We're going to do the CMMS panel discussion and a bunch of other cool stuff.
We are. Thank you. I look forward to chilling, chopping it up, talking a bunch of shit, and just hanging out, man.
All right, man. Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Save 50% to attend the Reliable Plant and Machinery Lubrication Conference and Exhibit happening June 3rd through 6th, 2024 in Chicago. Use code GREG50OFF at conference.reliableplant.com or click the link below. Learning sessions, case studies, the latest technology. Reliable Plant covers every facet of asset management and reliability in one 4-day event. We'll see you in Chicago. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit cmmsradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.